Hi, so next we are going to get into chapter 6 and data collection. So you might have prior experience with this. I know you do from everything that you've done in Qual 1 and Qual 2 and just other experiences that you may have had. So as we think about our research design memo, we're really focusing on aligning your research questions with your methods, the methods that you're choosing for data collection. So as you can see here in this chart that we've been working at, starting with your research question, what are you studying? Of course, we already know core constructs, goals, and study site participants, but this is where we are for chapter 6. What are the methods that you are using for data collection and then also data analysis? We'll get to that in the next lecture. But how are you going to get the data that you need to answer or address your research questions? So what methods would best help you get that information? And then, of course, the rationale. How? How will those methods with this population answer your question, and why is it valuable? So again, continuing that thread, your reason, building upon the argument that you've created in your conceptual framework. And then instruments. Instruments is a traditional terminology that we use a lot in quantitative research, but for the purposes of qualitative research, thinking about the tangible, the practical, what you actually need. What tools will you need to help you collect your qualitative data? Might be an interview protocol, might be a guide. There's a lot of different ways that researchers approach this, but these are the three main things to think about as we work through this. Oh no, okay, let me fix my, no, okay. Let me make this delete. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so here I have a little quick table with the data collection methods, the four main ones that are discussed in chapter 6. And then aligning with that chart I just showed you, the method, the data sources. So if you are doing observation or participant observation, your data sources are field notes. And chapter 6 shows you a couple examples of what this can look like. They can be in a notebook, but it's really important that you have a structure for this if you are doing observation. So that's something to think about. Of course, chapter 6 mentions too that your methods need to be flexible and they can adjust to adapt once you start collecting data. But it is important that you have a plan of what your field notes might look like, what some strategies you are going to use, where you will store them. All of those logistical questions are part of your method and your methods that you're going to be using to collect data. If you're doing interviews, you need your data is going to be those transcripts. So the interview transcripts, they might be audio recorded, probably not video recorded for your purposes, but those transcripts. And then also your memos. There's also great examples in chapter 6 of the field notes or the interview and then your analytic memo right next to it. I really like something like that. And in order to do that, you're going to need your interview protocol for your instrument. So the data collection method is your interview, the data source is your transcripts, and the instruments that you'll use to get that is your interview protocol. Now, the researcher records, of course, the analytic memo, your voice memos, all of those that you're keeping throughout the process. Then finally, if you are using any type of documents or materials or artifacts, if you're doing a case study, for instance, the data could be a variety of different things, maybe documents, lesson plans, a school policy that you are using, perhaps even student work, a teacher, something that a teacher has created, as long as you have hired me to collect it. Now, for these, the instrument, I can't think of anything general or that would apply to all of them, but there might be specific instruments. Like if you are doing documents, you would need to create a description of what documents you are including and why in order to how you are going to find the documents. And then I should have put analytic memos there, but I did not there. So this is to help you see the detail that you need to go into when you are discussing your data collection. So you're talking about the method you're using, the corresponding data sources, and the instruments that you are going to use to elicit that data. And of course, in the text, they went into depth about, well, they went into some depth about some different approaches and different contours and ethical considerations for each of these too. That might be important for you to consider. So at the beginning of the chapter, they continued on this theme of the assumptions of qualitative research. And the same thing applies to when you are making choices that, again, build this argument, making choices about the methods you'll use for data collection. So these are some great questions to reflect on as you refine and be more specific about how you are going to approach data collection. So interviews, yes. What kind of interview are you doing? What kind of protocol will you create and why? So thinking about how you view the nature of research, technical and neutral. Are you more so trying to bracket and suspend your biases? Or are you taking a more critical approach where your subjectivities, you are assuming and understanding that is going to be included in a co-construction of knowledge? Same thing, this continuum here, the relationship with participants, distant and objective or intimate, involved. Again, a co-construction. The direction of the gaze, like outward, this is like, you could think of this also the emic or etic a little bit, but in terms of how the researcher is going to view participants. Again, the purpose of research. And I think that everyone has gotten super sophisticated in how they are articulating the purpose and who their research is for and why and what they hope it accomplishes. And that builds into the audience. And then also the researcher's political position in terms of the content of the subject area. Are you there to just collect information? Do you just want to understand perspectives? Or are you going into this with your own political perspective about the topic and hoping to do that critical research? So thinking about where you fall there will affect the methods that you choose for data collection. And then researchers' views on agency. And so that applies for not only the researcher, but also participants. Do participants, are they already constructing knowledge in your view, or are you shining a light on them, allowing them to speak? Are you giving them a voice, or do they already have a voice? So thinking about some things like that can help you refine your writing and your whole overall approach to make sure that it reflects what you truly believe. So feel free to drop a comment or any connections or thoughts that you have when you read through this part of the chapter. Maybe a brief reflection about where you are if you have something to add to this discussion about like where you fall. Sadly, we're not together, so we can't do small groups. And then here, feel free to pause to read these questions more into depth. But these are some reflective questions to help you, again, refine your data collection methods and how you are going to write about them, how you are going to argue for the choices that you've made and provide a solid rationale. So yes, again, feel free to pause here if you want to look into here or if you have any comments about these. Okay, so I know that everyone is drawing on a different qualitative genre. And so you have been reading a variety of different articles for your bibliographic library. I've asked you over the past week, I don't know, it's a blur, over the past week or so to start to look at the methodology of some of the articles that you are looking at, and then even choose some methodological texts that you can look at to look at the choices, the methods that those researchers are using and how they are providing a rationale for why they made those choices. So in the next section of this perusal, I included chapter 6. So based on whatever qualitative genre you are using, or whatever data collection method that most aligns with where you are right now. You can go there and leave any comments that you had as you were reading chapter 6. And if you are noticing anything in the articles that you're reading about their data collection methods, you can use those there. So go ahead and pause, go to the next section in chapter 6, and scroll through to the sections that apply best to you. And you can reflect there and talk with each other about what you're noticing about within your genre, what qualitative data collection methods that you tend to be seeing. And here are those questions for you here, so you can remember. Okay, so now that you have had a look and reflected about the content in chapter 1, we are going to start the first part of our memo for today. So we are going to be thinking about the data that you need to address your research purpose and your research question. And you are going to write a mini memo reflecting on your data collection methods. Again, these can be preliminary, it can be amusing, it does not have to be final. This is just a chance for you to apply what we read about in chapter 6 to your current thinking. And again, it's not definitive, as it mentioned in the chapter. It's always okay to adjust these. Make sure that you include your rationale. Why are these methods appropriate? I'm sorry, my camera might be covering this, but let me fix it. Okay, this is better. So your rationale, why these methods are appropriate, what type of this method will you use? Again, looking back into chapter 6 and how they delineated different applications of the 4 main approaches they discussed, or using your methodological articles that you have been using. The subtypes, like not just interviews, what kind of interviews, what will your approach to interviews be? And then think about the continua too. What else do you need to think about or decide? And then when you're doing this, you're going to think about each research question. You're going to take your research question and you are going to map on the specific data source that will answer the question and the researcher records that you will need. Now, if you only have one research question, you just need to do this for one, but I know some of you have more than one research question. And then you can start to discuss the preparation of any necessary data collection instruments, like a research protocol. We are going to come back to this memo after the second part of this lecture, so that's okay if you don't have ideas right off the bat yet. So right now, go ahead and pause. And I want you to do the first two, just a brief reflection on data collection methods. And you might not have anything to put here. Again, that's okay. But if you have something to say, a question for me, a comment, or if you just want to write in this box, that is perfectly fine. If you're ready to start mapping on your research question, you can put your research question here, the data sources that you'll need, and researcher records. Again, we'll be coming back to this next. And you might just have one. And so you can delete the other columns, but go ahead and work on this. Okay, so moving on to the second part of the lecture, I want to really dive into interviews. I know that everyone is planning on including some type of interview in their study, and interviews really are a key part of most qualitative research. So even if you don't end up using interviews, this is great for you to refine just your skills as a researcher. So when you start to think about using an interview as a data collection method, you need to start thinking about your interview protocol. Your interview protocol is the instrument that you are going to use to collect that data. And so after you've thought about the type of interview that you want to do you want it to be semi-structured? Is it going to be very structured? How much are you going to talk? Are you going to engage with the participants? Maybe you're using a particular approach like phenomenology and you have a specific approach to how you will interview. So once you know what type of interview that you will do, you can start writing your interview protocol. And in my opinion, you can work on this throughout the process. Sometimes I notice that students, their research questions are actually interview questions. So sometimes you can think of a question that you want to ask participants and you conflate that with your research question. So you can start just creating a long list of interview questions that you might want to ask, and then of course pare those down before you actually conduct the interview. So you might just start jotting down every time you get an idea of something that might be a good interview question for your study, just add it to the list. That way you have a lot to go from that you can refine from. But your final interview protocol, depending again on the approach, you should plan for probably 8 to maybe 12 interview questions, because the goal of a qualitative interview is to elicit narrative data. Even if you're not doing a narrative inquiry, you want the participants to give open-ended answers and talk about experiences in depth. And so that's why it'll be like a narrative in a sense, because you might say, tell me about a time when, and you are going to try to lead them to talking to you about an experience in depth that gives you this rich data that you can analyze. So it is good to plan follow-ups and probes and elaboration cues that you can give them. And the text does talk about this as well. But that's something to keep in mind. So here are just a few categories for you to think of, categories of questions that might apply to the type of interview that you're doing, the type of study that you are doing, like maybe experience or behaviors. So describe a time. What was it like living through? What made you? Opinion or values. If you're trying to get at those teacher beliefs, like some of you are, these might be some great example stems, question stems that you could use. Feelings, if you are interested in emotionality, for instance, or what it feels like to do an experience, you might use those. Knowledge, if you're interested in learning from teachers or students as the expert about something, you might be asking some questions like these. Sensory questions. These are great for narrative. Set the scene. Tell me about the day. Take me through the experience. Background. You might want to start off like this. So these are some stems that you can use to help you write your interview protocol. And so we are going to, right here in the preparation instrument protocol, if you have ideas for your interview protocol, you can start jotting them down here. If you want to go back to this slide, pause here, go to your memo, you can start drafting some ideas for interview questions you might want to ask your participant. I remember the hardest thing for me when I was a beginner researcher is I wanted to ask my participants the research question. I want to know students' perspectives about race and gender in STEM. And so I would say, hi, what are your perspectives? And that's not effective. So more effective is to spend a lot of time playing around with stems, question stems, and thinking about how you can slowly build to get them to talk and answer your overall research question. So you know your research question, but you're not going to ask your participant the research question. You are going to break it down into a series of interview questions that get them to talk about the core construct that you're interested in. So again, these stems are here for you as you start to build your interview protocol. So context. So when we did our conceptual framework, we did a memo. I think this was memo 4.2, where we did study setting and study context. And always great any type of research always contextualizes the research within the broader socio-political context. So here are some questions for you to think about how to keep the context in mind when you are drafting those interview protocol questions. So think about that. And then again, you can also think about how where you are on the continuum for assumptions for qualitative research as it applies to data collection, and think about how you are going to either explicitly or implicitly be aware of the broader context informing your study. And after you drafted those interview questions, you can take a look at these questions too, to make sure to reflect on your questions and help you refine, pare down, edit to make them fully inclusive. Okay. So again, something else to think about when you are writing your chapter 3 of your prospectus and your dissertation, and even your research design memo for this class is, okay, so you know your data collection method, you know the instrument that you're going to use, the researcher records that you are going to use, then you still need to think about logistics. When and where will your data collection take place? And they did talk about this in chapter 6 too. Your interview protocol, thinking about that, and then always the ethical considerations. And chapter 6 was continuously weaving this through and coming back to this topic. And so that's something for you to reflect about too as you work on this memo. And then just anything else that came up. So I wanted to share with you briefly how you go from, well, okay, hindsight is 2020. This is a research project that I think that we talked about this because we saw the students at Georgia State, the high school students who are in the Academy for Future Teachers. So this was a research project. I wish I would have shown you like research question, core constructs, all of that, but I wanted to show you how, and I might come back to this too when we do analysis, what the interview protocol and actually transcript look like for this paper. So this paper was about the high school students' perceptions of race and gender in STEM as high school students who are participating in a STEM-based camp focused on teaching here at Georgia State. So this is just a little excerpt of the interview. So here you can see, describe how you would envision yourself as a teacher. And so you can see some of the probes that I was doing here, and then that turned into the study. And I think I will come back to this when I show you analysis. And if you are curious, in the slides here, you can see a transcript, you can critique me. I can't remember if I did this interview, but we had a research team, but I think I probably did. So if you want to critique me and give me feedback on my interviewing, you can feel free to do so, because interviewing is so hard. So that is an example that I wanted to share with you. Again, this one was about participant perspectives, was using a critical lens, but trying to center students' perspectives and get them to talk about their experiences and share the knowledge that they had. Okay, so up next, I would like for you to go into the article that you read. So we have the required interview piece, and then you are to choose one of these articles. So you can go to the article that you read and leave your comments, your reactions, and discuss with whoever is in your group. I guess it will be a surprise. You can discuss your reactions to it, think about, pay particular attention to what their approach was to interviewing, then think about how their interview questions reflect the study goals in their research questions. So look at that connection and see if you get any insights there. And then think about what type of data resulted from the particular application of interviews that they used. So here are just some questions to guide you as you go into the article that you read and talk about your reaction. Okay, and so after you do that, I want you to come back and finish your memo for the day. Here you can finish jotting down any ideas that you have for interview questions for your interview protocol, and then just any reflections that you have after completing this, your readings for chapter 6, thinking about what I shared in the lecture, and then any discussion that you had with your group about the article that you read, questions for me, questions for yourself. Yes, and that is the memo of the day. You can go ahead and turn it into iCollege, and I will take a look. Okay, so the next steps before you complete the next perusal. Oh, this is wrong. So chapter 7, you can read anything that, chapter 7, we're not going to go into depth about here. So we are actually going to be going to chapter 9. Let me find this. I'm so sorry. Okay, so for the next, and this still isn't right. So for the next perusal, you are going to be reading chapter 8, and then you are going to choose one article about data analysis. So that is going to be the next perusal. Bye.